Welcome to Kevin's Corner. Now, this is a new area of the garden that we've just finished, and you might have picked up that sometimes my husband doesn't like what I do in the garden. He didn't like me taking the concrete up in the yard. He didn't like the stone piers I put in that garden. There was lots of things. We had one garden which he nicknames the Garden Too Far, which we did a wildlife garden for a TV series. So, in order to keep matrimonial happiness and peace, I've created this little garden especially for him. And it's all really down to Nina Campbell. This garden you access actually from four main entrances. One from this room here, the crypt, one from the sitting room, then you can go one into the other garden and one into the courtyard. And that's lovely. I think a garden without access is really bad. But the problem was, this room, which is the most direct room from the kitchen, was very difficult to get out of because we had two little doors here. And as you can see, the whole room is partially below ground level. It's an undercroft. So this is a stone vaulting that was built in the 13th century. And access, getting through these two narrow doors that opened outwards, especially with trays and things, was really quite difficult, so we didn't use it. But by changing it to one wide door, it's really made the whole thing easier. It's a stupid little thing, but it's made the world of difference. It did mean to say we had to dig out a bit of the level here and put two new steps in, which Dave did really nicely. So he found these lovely big bullnose chunks that he had left over from some job. And so we used those for the two treads. And now you've got this nice little place before you come up into the main bit. So this part of the house was a very small, apparently 13th century manor. And it consisted of the lower story underneath, which was a vaulted stone undercroft, is a vaulted stone undercroft. And the reason it's got these amazing stone vaults, some people said it was an abbey, some people said all sorts of things. But I believe that actually that was the way they built chambers below ground, or partially below ground for storage. That was just the way they did it then, with stone vaulting. In Stamford, there's a couple of restaurants with them like that. And it meant being partially below ground, it meant that it just kept very constant temperature. So that room would have, I think, just been used for storage in the winter months. And they all lived up in the big room, above it. And there was an external stone staircase and a big doorway there, which you could just see the markings on the wall. And so they lived in that solar above the recessed undercroft. And there's a lovely early English window on the far side, which has been blocked up, which we did get planning permission to open and we just never got round to it. But it's interesting the way houses develop and how they have different uses. And the people before us, just 2 years before we came, the crypt, the undercroft, we call it the crypt, was not part of the house. It was separate from the house. It was divided into different rooms and was just used for storing junk. And so they pulled the two rooms together, and there were 5 doors leading off the crypt, which was extraordinary. And so then we just sort of rationalised it a bit, and now we just got 3 doorways leading off it, which makes it work a bit better. But it's very much the hub of the house. We walk through it every day. It's a lovely dining room in the evening, snug winter dining room. And I just think it's a really special room. And it's lovely that by opening up this space, we will use that space more. This was a wide planting bed, but actually by paving, this little bit of extra paving, even though we've got this big area when we're entertaining, we've got lots of mates around, this little one right by the house is the most sheltered sunny spot in the garden. Now you might not think so today when we've got a fair few clouds, but it is very warm and very sheltered. And now all we did basically was just to pave it. And the paving itself is quite interesting because this paving here is Indian stone, which is something like £13 a square metre. This here is real York, which I put in to frame the bead and gravel. And then the main slabs I used for this bit, which Dave laid, are York, which are obviously way more. I think they're about £60–70 a square metre. And it's quite difficult to tell the difference between the reclaimed York and the Indian stone. And people are very, very sniffy about Indian stone. But I think a lot of it is the way you lay them. And if you lay them with staggered joints in courses with varying widths, which aren't done here, we've used it in lots of projects, and people assume it's York. They think it's York. But when you do it in funny modern patterns, then I think they realise it's Indian stone. But so that's interesting. And the bedding, we've just put in a bit of gritty sand in between the joints. We did it quite quickly. And I will get a few things to grow in there eventually, little eredgerons and things like that. So the table base I found on eBay for about £17, and then I got Jamie from JFab, the metalworker, who does a lot of work for me, to make the top up for me, and we put the studs around the edge. I thought this was going to be too small. We decided on 900 diameter, which you can just get 4 chairs around, and if we've got more, we'll go over there. So it's a nice intimate size. I was going to make it 1 metre, but I think that would have been way too large with hindsight. And I always use this little diagram I've got, which shows you the amount of size of table for the number of people. And that is quite useful, because once you've bought the table, it's a bit difficult to change it. So always really think of it hard, do a template, think what shape do you want for your table and what size. And I always find round tables are really convivial up to about 8, because with 8, which is like a 4 foot, 1.2 metre diameter, you can speak across and you can all have a group discussion. When it gets beyond that size, you can only chat to the people either side of you. And I just think it's better to have more possibilities of people to talk to than just the people either side of you. So I only like round tables for smaller amounts. But it's very personal. The chairs I got, these are new and they are made in China from Wells Reclamation, but I think they're quite sweet, they're quite nice. You do find lots of lovely wirework, old ones, but they obviously cost a lot more than those. I found the little pineapples from eBay, which I love, those little stone pineapples. And the pot is my favourite pot from Thomas and Cudworth, which I've put up there. This wood burning stove, I'm not quite sure if we'll use it that much, but it's a nice spot for it. The armchairs look way too big. We've got big cushions for them, but they're what we have, and I might change them in time if I find something. I'm not beholden to that, but I've sort of nestled them in with the planting. So as for the planting around here, this Banksian rose I think is lovely, and I think this self-set here because I certainly don't remember planting it. And the Banksian rose comes out really early. It probably comes out at the end of April, and the one I've got in the yard is Banksias subnormalis, which has a slightly paler yellow flower and much more scent. This one doesn't have much scent, I don't think at all, but it's a very big rose. So I do chop it back every year, really very hard. The other little rose has been here for years, and that was one my Uncle David gave to me, and it was a climate that he recommended. I can't remember the name now. I quite like it, but it's not my favourite colour. So the jasmine officinale, is London hardy. I've just put it there. I moved it out from under cover. It was just under cover and doesn't flower so well. So I've moved it out, and now the leaves are turning. It all looks a bit bunched up, but the leaves will turn out in a few days, and I think it will start to flower really well. In a heavy winter, I will cover it, really hard winter. But I tend to plant out tender things now after most of the danger of frost is past, so they can get their roots down really well and establish before any hard frost we might have next winter. Always a good time to chance it. This yew is nice. So I put 4 of them in these baseless containers for the terrace, and I just put in little bushy shrubs and we've trained them up. Yew, Taxus baccata, hates growing in a container, but you've guessed it, I've cut the bases out so they're all growing into the ground. They're never fed or watered, although having said that, this one is smaller than the other 4. Possibly because of the drought effect of the wall. It's in the rain shadow of the wall, so any rain that we have comes whizzing over, and it tends not to get right up against the wall, and it tends to be quite a dry zone. So I have actually now started watering it to push it on so it catches up with its mates. But I love these yews. I think they're really nice, as do I love the quince behind the wood burning stove. We would have to pull that forward a bit to use it, I think. It would be too hot for the quince. But that is Isfahan, so it's a very unusual variety of quince. The speciality of it is that you're meant to be able to eat the quince direct from the tree. Now, they are not the sweetest fruit imaginable. I mean, quince are always better unless you dry them, and then they're beautifully, almost sweet, but a wonderful flavour. The best way to eat quince, I think. But this one, Isfahan, is one that you're meant to eat from the tree, and we've trained it against the wall. Star at the moment is obviously these irises, the raspberry blush, which I just think are magnificent. It just makes me laugh because I always do the blush badly. I always overstate it, but I would love to have my blush looking that sort of colour. It's just fantastic. And the mutilated specimens next to the irises are, of course, my box. And they were big balls which stopped the view out. And I think the views out from this garden up the Serpentine Walk, that the peach trees need a little bit of a trim, but I think the views out up to there and the urns at the end, you can just see. So those urns are just set up on plinths, and the plinths are actually rabbit traps. So, which the farmer had next door, so I've just put them up onto the rabbit traps, and it just elevates the urns and it makes them more noticeable from the door. And so now I've cut them hard back, you can see out, and I will keep them much tighter. I'm just debating whether to remove one of those trunks, but I quite like having one with one and one with two. I think it looks a bit, gosh, the sun's coming out. The calamendrins I love, so we've got them running around here in the big pots and the larger one in the corner, and they are so divine. I think you get that lovely burst of vitamin C, and we just eat them straight off the tree, which is why there aren't many fruits on them, because we're always munching them. But they are very prolific. The loquat is interesting because we put that there in a TV makeover when we had exotic plants in these borders, and we put in the loquat, and it got very big. It grew up to this top of the second story. So I thought, oh, I'll get rid of it. So I chopped it down, and now it's burst back as a shrub. But I quite like it at that size, and I think I'm going to maintain it at that sort of size. Otherwise, we've just got a few old favourites: hydrangea, Madame Molière, flowering on new and old wood, so it has a lovely white blooms that last for a long time. We've got geranium madriense, which a client in the Isle of Wight gave me. This lovely abutilon Victorian lady with its pale pink flowers. A geranium, the Duchess of Beaufort gave me a cutting from Babington House, and it grows massive all over their orangery there. This one I'm keeping a little bit smaller, and the last of the tulips. So more of the planting. I put myrtle here. I put a myrtle plant there I took from cuttings, one there, and there's one there. And myrtle is a sign of love and friendship, so it's the obvious plant for here. I've got asters here. I've just planted, groups them all the way around. Herb Schnee, which is about 1.2 metres tall, white flowers. It's a good one because it doesn't get downy mildew so much, and it's got very sturdy stems, so it doesn't need staking so much. And this little twining climber here is quite an unusual plant that was given to me, and it's Schizandra chinensis, and it produces lovely big clusters of red berries, which are edible, and they use them a lot in Chinese medicine. And the flower before that is a sort of paley white, not totally significant really, but the berries are the thing that you hope for. And I have not checked up on the scientific, if they really are good for you, if it's just another of these things that is meant to do everything for you, but nobody really knows. But I'll try it and see. And then we've got a little hart's tongue fern. I put a rooted cutting of Tracheospermum. So it's quite a simple palette, a few favourites in pots, and it's going to be a place for all my tender plants. I think this is a space that we're going to use a lot. My husband is really enjoying it, and it is definitely his space. He spends more time out here than anywhere. And so I think it's good that he enjoys the garden a bit more, because he does. I'm a little bit frenetic about the garden, or shall we say obsessive, but it's my job, it's my passion, and so I do get a bit carried away. But anyway, I'm really pleased he's got his own special space.